Well, YouTubers, we've already started this project because you saw me just pushing the buttons on the stove. Maybe that gives you a hint that this is not a weaving video. It's been a long time since I've done a cooking video. This isn't exactly cooking, it's going to be a baking video. Anyways, I'm going to make scones. And I'm following fairly closely, but not exactly, the recipe in this book, which is called Simply Scones, Quick and Easy Recipes for More Than 70 Delicious Scones and Spreads by Leslie Weiner and Barbara Albright. But I'm going to modify their recipe. I can't leave anything well enough alone. So we're going to work on something that they call apricot white chocolate and walnut scones. We're not going to put the walnuts in. So it's going to be apricot, white chocolate, and absolutely decadently lovely flavored scones. So let's see what we need to put into it and then get started putting it all together. First ingredient, now that we've got the oven preheating to 375, is 1 cup of flour. Now a 2nd cup of flour. So our grand total will be 2 cups of flour. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is not the next thing to go in. I've got a bunch of these sun-made Mediterranean apricots. They're the fairly dried, snacky type apricots as far as I'm concerned. But we need about a cup of them, and we need them cut up. So we'll measure out a cup. That's a cup. That was the whole rest of the package. Okay, but what we need to do is set those aside, but we need to chop them up. And here's something that's not in the recipe, but that we've learned from sad experience. These things are wet, and if you start cutting them, they're just a mess. So you take your scissors or your knife, if you're using it, and put that into the flour before any other ingredients are in there. And just cut this way, and it makes it much easier to cut them up. We'll do one more with you watching, and then the rest I'm going to do offline. You want fairly small chunks, like so. So that's the next step, even though it's not written that way in the recipe. The next thing we need is 1/3 of a cup of granulated sugar, or plain white sugar. Pretty close. A little under. I'll grab just a little bit more. That looks about close enough. And now we need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 1, 2. Next thing we're going to do is just make sure all those are mixed together. The next thing to go in is 1/4 cup of butter. They recommend unsalted, but I don't have any of that, so we're using plain old salted butter. And they also want it cut into small chunks, at least as small as 1/2 inch. So I took a 1/2 of a 1/4 pound stick and chopped it into these small chunks, and all of that goes right into the flour, and we'll take the pastry cutter and start mixing that until it's nicely granulated. Next thing I need is about 1/2 cup of cream. Now the recipe calls for whipping cream. I don't have any. I'm going to use half and half. So there's a half a cup of half and half. To that I'm going to add 1 large egg. And finally I'm supposed to use 1½ teaspoons of vanilla. I think don't have enough. There's 1. I do have enough, but that just about kills my vanilla. So I'm going to mix that all together with a fork to break up the egg, and then it all goes into the flour. Into the flour, and then I knead it until it's all nice and smooth. We'll start mixing it with the fork, and when it comes time that I can knead it with my hand, I will. So it's not fully into a ball yet, and that's fine. I've put flour on my hands. I'm going to take the dough off of the fork, and it works better if you try and compress it into a ball before you've got it completely worked up, because you don't want to be messing with the glutens in the flour to turn it into a bread, although it gets really messy when you do it this way, even with the flour on my hands.
So recipe also calls for white chocolate chunks. We are going to use white chocolate chips. And we found 3/4 cup roughly. Get that on camera so you can see. Equals the amount of white chocolate chunks they want. Pour those in, pour the apricots in, and fold those into the dough.
If anybody likes playing with mud pies, this is the job for them. Okay, so I don't have enough hands to do this at times, but there you go. There's the dough pretty well mixed. I have got an ungreased cookie sheet. I'm going to try and stick the rest of these onto it, but what a mess. This stuff really sticks to your fingers, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I just want to pat it down to, I think about 1/2 inch to make a big, round
The book suggests about a 9-inch circle. Once you get it, just kind of go around and make nice edges. Just like we did with the shortbread.
Shortbread's not as messy.
No, it's not. Okay.
No. Okay, the next step is to go wash your hands. Okay, it's ready to go in the oven almost. Fancy serrated knife. What we want to do is make score marks in it so we know where we're going to cut it. So it'll be baked.
No, full cuts.
All the way down?
All the way down.
It'll bake together.
It'll bake together, but you get the nice baked edges then.
Okay.
That way you don't have them trying to crumble apart from when you cut them fully.
So is that perfectly all the way down to the metal? Not quite, but it's pretty close. You can see that I've effectively got it cut into its parts that we're going to want, and of course I've made a mess of the knife. So the next step is into the oven. So here we go into a 375 degree oven, and we start baking. "15 minutes are up, time to check it." I don't think it looks done enough. It's got to be lightly golden brown on top. Close it, we give it 5 more minutes. We had to extend the time. We're up to 24 minutes now of baking at 375. And I'm going to do a toothpick test. Got to be careful not to burn me. Toothpick came out clean, so we're going to call that done. Turn off the heat, and it's not golden brown on top, but it's starting to brown just a little bit, and it says it's done, and the bottom is starting to brown, so I don't want to overdo it. So scone has been out for about 5 or 6 minutes. The cookie sheet is sitting on a cookie cooling rack, and I'm just going to kind of move that a little to the side and see if I can't pick up the whole thing and transfer it directly to the cooling rack. You know, to me it feels like we should have used a greased pan, but hey, I went with the recipe. So let's see. If I can do this without making a total disaster of it. We made it. Still needs to cool for just a little bit longer before we cut it up and eat it. But we are supposed to, while it's on the cooling rack, recut. So that's what I'm doing, is the recut. See, the thing, I think the reason it needs to cool a little bit more is the white chocolate is still pretty liquidy. So we want these to cool. They don't have to be cold when you eat, but they do have to be a little bit cooler. So there's the scones. They've cooled for about 10 minutes on the cookie rack now, and it's about time for our taste test. Okay, scones are ready for eating. Take a close look at that thing. You can see the apricot in there, a little bit of white chocolate scattered throughout. These are decadent. I mean, that's the only way I can explain it. It's the best word I've got, is that the flavor is just decadent. When it first comes out, it looks like it's not cooked through, but it is. You just leave it sit for 5 minutes on the cookie sheet at least, on it, and the cookie sheet's on a cooling rack. Then give it another 10-15 minutes on the cooling rack to cool off, and then eat these while they're still warm. We're talking really decadently delicious, sweet. Oh, this is good stuff. Anyways, I haven't done a cooking video in a long time. I know it's been for ages, so I thought I'll just do it up with something really good. If you like my channel, I'd appreciate you subscribing. If you are a subscriber, thanks a million for being there for me. Bye-bye.